Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You are tuned in to the Ramadan special on EAVA 102.5 FM. My name's Shermeen and I'm the host for the show today called Morning Matters. And I'm going to start by painting a picture. Imagine going to sleep tonight only to find by morning that you've lost your home, your parents, your children. You've lost all your worldly belongings. I could very well be talking about any number of tragedies around the world. But this one happened here in England. It happened 2 years ago during the month of Ramadan. Today, my dear listeners, I hope you can join me in reflecting upon the Grenfell Tower fire, those we lost that day, and those who continue to find justice 2 years on. To discuss this, I'm joined today by Remy Mohammed, who is the Grenfell project coordinator for the charity Inquest. She is a solicitor who specializes in criminal defense law and prison law. She's also the president of the Association of Muslim Lawyers, a voluntary organization which has focused on interfaith work, seminars, events, and networking and advocacy. Remy has written for the HuffPost and has delivered a TEDx titled Dignity and Defiance After Disasters. Thank you, Remy, for joining us today. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, Shermeen. Thank you for having me on.
It's an absolute honour to have you on, Remy. Remy, perhaps I'd like to start really with looking back on what happened 2 years ago at the Grenfell Tower.
Yeah, and I think we all remember when we woke up that morning on the 14th of June of 2017 and seeing those shocking images of a massive tower block in flames. And it still shocks me to this day when I see images of that building as to how this could possibly have happened in one of the richest boroughs of London in 2017. And for your listeners, the fire, when it broke out just before 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
In a flat in the tower block, and that was on the 4th floor. The fire very, very quickly spread and engulfed the entire building, and it's the worst fire that England has seen since World War II, and it tragically claimed the lives of 72 men, women, and children. And images of the fire dominated the news around the world, and there was a real public feeling of shock and anger and outrage, and people wanted answers. People wanted answers as to how this possibly could have happened.
And this is the thing is that it is rare. And the fact that when this happened, as you said, it was all over the media, and it was a shock to the system for a lot of us who were watching that day and perhaps watching around the world. But it goes beyond, and I was thinking about this, it goes beyond the people who lost their lives as well. There were 72 people, as you said, men, women and children who lost their lives that day. But there were also those people who survived that and had to go on with life.
Yeah, absolutely. And just the sort of the mental health repercustions of that, the anguish, the survivor guilt as to why, somebody may have survived and somebody didn't. There's a lot affecting the community of Grenfell at the moment.
And I did look up, and just to get an idea of how many households were affected by the Grenfell Tower tragedy. And on the Full Fact website, which is the UK's independent fact-checking charity, it said 210 households were affected. So this is a significant number of people who have been affected by this.
Absolutely. Because if you look at the site itself, Grenfell Tower is a tower block of 23 stories. It was built back in 1974, and there were 129 homes in the block itself. But there are finger blocks that actually run off the tower as well. So you had all those blocks also affected by it because of the level of the fire and the smoke. A lot of people had to be evacuated from their homes, and a lot have not been able to move back.
And just to remind listeners, if you are tuned in to the Ramadan special on EAVA 102.5 FM. I'm speaking with Remy Mohammed today about the Grenfell Tower tragedy. If you would like to text in your thoughts, your questions, on this. It's 07450 925 084. 07450 925 084. This tragedy happened 2 years ago, in the 19th of Ramadan. It's 2 years on, and as you mentioned earlier, at 12:54 the fire broke out on that fateful night, and it spread incredibly quickly. And I was reading that it spread to the lower floors. About 1:15 a.m. it had spread to the 17th floor. So we're talking about in under half an hour. It's such a significant spread of fire.
It is, and a lot of the firefighters who gave evidence at the phase one of the inquiry talked about it being completely unprecedented in terms of they hadn't seen anything like it before in this country.
Just to remind people, we are also streaming on Facebook Live, so you can pop comments on there. Oh, we have a comment already from Rahima. I said, I remember watching this live. It was such a difficult Ramadan. My brothers and sisters were being burnt alive. Such a tragic event. I don't believe justice has been served to those who have died and those who are still surviving, still living in temporary accommodation. And that's the thing, subhanAllah, it's still ongoing.
It is. The following day after the fire, the Prime Minister announced a public inquiry to establish the truth of what happened. And in the UK, we do have a history of public inquiries which go back centuries, in fact.
If I can stop you and ask you to explain, what is a public inquiry? For listeners probably unaware of what that means.
Absolutely, it's a good question. It's basically a formal hearing to try and establish the truth of what's happened. So trying to establish the facts, determine accountability, restore public confidence as well, because public confidence was completely shaken after what had happened, and ensure that mistakes are not repeated. And normally an inquiry is set up with a judge, a chairman at the helm, and then that inquiry will call for evidence from those involved, and those involved are invited to become core participants in the inquiry. And to give you an idea of the scale of this Grenfell inquiry, we have 568 individual people who are core participants, and 30 organisations who are core participants.
It's huge. I don't know anything about public inquiries, but it sounds huge.
It is.
And you would know, given all your professional experience with the law. And it's phenomenal, actually. And as you said, it explained what a public inquiry is, getting to the bottom of what actually happened, and why those people lost their lives that fateful night is very important. And
also to try and prevent this from ever happening again. This has happened nearly 2 years ago. We have to try and learn lessons from that and actually put changes in place to ensure that something like this never happens again, and that's the purpose of the public inquiry. And alongside the public inquiry, there's an ongoing criminal investigation. The police are actually investigating this, but they have said that they will not pass their file to the Crown Prosecution Service to make any decisions until the public inquiry comes to an end. To give you an idea of the timescales of this public inquiry, it actually began hearing evidence back on the 22nd of May last year, so that's 2018. Hearings came to an end in December of 2018, and that was phase one of the inquiry, actually looking at the night of the fire itself, how the fire broke out, spread, and looking at that evacuation that took place. Phase two of the inquiry is not scheduled to begin until early 2020, so it won't happen this year. It's likely to begin in early 2020. And so if we're talking of a criminal investigation not actually reaching the Crown Prosecution Service until the inquiry is completed, we're talking years.
I'm trying to understand what you're saying, Ramath, and it blows your mind, really.
It does, and I think it's something that families and bereaved survivors especially have had to try and get their heads around, and that is that the road to justice is a very long one sometimes, and there is a lot of information that needs to be gathered. The inquiry does need to take evidence from those involved, and it will take time. It's a very lengthy, protracted legal process.
I wanted to move on to the role of inquest. You mentioned organisations who are involved in this public inquiry. Where does Inquest, the organisation that you are project coordinator for, sit in all of this?
We are not one of the core participants to the inquiry, but from the moment that the fire happened, we became involved. As a charity, we have been established since 1981, and we provide expertise on contentious deaths and their investigation to bereaved people, to lawyers, the media, parliamentarians and policymakers. But what we do, our specialist casework, is helping families of those that have lost their loved ones in prison or police custody, immigration detention, mental health settings, and deaths involving multi-agency failings or where there's wider issues of state and corporate accountability. So to give you an example, we helped families involved in Hillsborough, the Marchioness disaster, the 7/7 bombings, and when the Grenfell Tower fire happened, we immediately began disseminating information and helping bereaved survivors. And in November of 2017, I was taken on as Grenfell project coordinator to specifically focus on Grenfell, to keep a watching brief on the inquiry and all other legal processes, to try and ensure that bereaved and survivors' voices are actually being heard in this process, and to ensure that bereaved and survivors have all the information that they need about this post-death investigative process that is happening now.
One of the pieces of work which was done by Inquest is the Family Consultation Day. Could you tell me a little bit more about what the Family Consultation Day was?
Absolutely. So what we decided to do at the end of the hearing for phase one was speak to families and lawyers and try and see whether there would be a value of trying to gather bereaved families together to speak to them about the aftermath of the fire and also about the process of phase one of the inquiry, to speak to them about their own lived experience of going through that and how, if anything, and if it needed to be, how it could actually be improved. And so we held a family consultation day, and that was in February of this year. And for those families who couldn't attend, we also did a questionnaire, and I did speak to families individually. But ultimately, we heard from families of 55 of the 72 that died. And the report, which is on our website, is called Family Reflections on Grenfell, No Voice Left Unheard.
We will try and get that put up, because I have sent in the links to the producer, put up the link for the report. And the report actually really, subhanAllah, it's worth reading. I read through this report. I didn't think I was going to manage to get through, and I'm glad I did, because it really just put that chaos which happened in the aftermath of the Grenfell Tower fire into context. And I wanted to read out a few quotes from that report and share those with the listeners, just to put it into context. Before I do that, just a quick reminder, you are tuned into the Ramadan special on EAVA 102.5 FM. If you do want to message into the studio, you can. It's 07450925084. That's 07450925084. We are also streaming on Facebook Live, on YouTube and on Twitter, and I am joined by Remy Mohammed, who is a Grenfell project coordinator for Inquest, and we're talking about and we're reflecting upon the Grenfell Tower tragedy, which was the largest fire which has happened since World War II. Is that right, Remy? Did I get that right?
Yeah? Yes, it is. It is, with the largest loss of life, yeah.
Largest loss of life, subhanAllah. Yeah, that is the report. The report's been put up onto the Facebook live stream, if anybody wants to sort of have a sweep through that while I'm reading out some of the quotes that I found. And honestly, you could actually read the whole report out on air. It is that... It really stops to make you think on so many levels. And just to start with this, I spoke to other residents. This is what families have said themselves. I spoke to other residents and I did a lot of research about what help was available. I was told to go to the Westway Centre. I went there and I was turned away. I wasn't given any help in terms of accommodation or a key worker. This was all the while I was looking for my family in various hospitals and asking the police for help in finding them. After a week and a half, I got news confirmed to me that none of my family had survived. And I just want to repeat that last line. After a week and a half, I got the news confirmed to me that none of my family had survived. That really threw me.
It is. It's a powerful, powerful report, because these are the words of bereaved families, and you know, they came together for this consultation, and they were extremely brave to go through what they've been through and to actually speak openly about it. But when you look at the report, you'll note that all of the quotes from bereaved families are all anonymised, and the reason that we assured that to families was so that people could speak openly about what they've been through. And in the aftermath, that's a resonating theme, really, when you look at the report. It's that there were problems with accessing information and support. And really, what families have said was there was a real absence of any local and national government response or a coordinated response. And what we did see was, the best of humanity. When we remember watching those scenes of after the fire, we saw, hundreds and hundreds of volunteers arriving on the scene, charities arrived on the scene to help.
We will be focusing on that. We will be focusing on that in the second part of the show. And if there are listeners out there who did go down to the Grenfell charity that day, do text in to the show, do get involved, do message us on Facebook, because I'd love to hear your stories as well. And coming back to this, the report, it said, another quote, "It was 4 days before we had the FLOs come out. We were told our relatives were on a safe list. We thought they were okay. Then we were told they were not accounted for." It's quite thingy. And then children have been totally forgotten. They need support at school, psychologically, for the long-term impact. They should be able to access a child psychiatrist privately to avoid the stigma associated with it. And that one really sort of, it took me back to watching the news footage in the aftermath of the Grenfell Tower fire, and it reminded me of one of the young people who was interviewed on TV, who was still yet to sit their GCSEs. And
yes.
I don't know if you saw, and that took me right back, and I just closed my eyes and I could see that young person talking about how they had to, and you just think about the young people. If you are doing your GCSEs right now, or you've got children who are doing their GCSEs right now, I want you to just take a moment to reflect on that. How fortunate we are not to be in that position. Alhamdulillah. And that leads me on to something else which is mentioned in the report, where it talks about, or one of the things it talks about is carrying on with life. And that's something that we remember the people who passed away, but there was all these people who survived, who had to carry on with their life. And one of the quotes that came up was, "Support for employers enabling families to take time off work without losing annual leave entitlement."
That was a suggestion that was made by bereaved families. When we did this report, we asked families to reflect on what recommendations they would make to assist families going through disaster situations like this in the future. And that's a really, really interesting suggestion, but it's an important one, because families said to me that, if I don't go to the public inquiry, I feel like I'm letting my family member that I lost down. Mm-hmm. And it's, that really is quite a powerful statement, because it's not fair to expect employers to give time off all the time for people to attend and actually take part in these public inquiries. And so I think it really is quite a good suggestion, and that's something that the government should really take note of, because we have a similar system with jury service, where people are paid, well, employers are paid when their employees go and do jury service. So I think that it's something that is worth considering to allow families to actually effectively participate in the inquiry process.
I think that's what really sort of struck me, was this idea that this is what is so easy for us to sort of forget, because it's 2 years on, yet we don't see the Grenfell Tower. We're in Leicester, we don't see that. But why I wanted to remember it is because families still have to carry on with their lives, and that they lost so much. I mean, it just stopping and reflecting upon some of the things that they lost in those few, it was minutes, really. In minutes, their lives went up in flames. All of their belongings were lost, not just their homes, the people that they loved. I mean, even just going back to that idea of the young person who had to go to their GCSEs. Imagine having all of her notes, her revision notes. These small things that we might think that insignificant. Your identity documents, that's the other thing that occurred to me. Your whole life, literally gone. And it really is something that we need to pause and think about, and one, appreciate how fortunate we are not to have gone through that, but also in what way we can support the people who have survived that tragedy, and in which ways we can do that.
Absolutely, and I think it's important that the Grenfell community are shown solidarity and support in their quest for the truth and for justice. And on the 14th of every month, there is a silent walk which takes place in Kensington. And around the country, I'm aware that there are other walks that take place on the 14th of the month in solidarity for those that live a bit further away. But next month will be the 2-year anniversary. It will be the 14th of June. And I do invite everybody to come to Kensington if they can, to show support and solidarity to the Grenfell community and walk. And it's a silent walk, and it actually is really powerful to walk the streets of Kensington in complete silence, holding banners and wearing green for the colour of Grenfell. And it's something that I actually do ask. And if you can't actually be there, then there are many support groups that you can actually sign up to and support. And one of the main ones is Grenfell United, and they are made up of bereaved and survivors from the tower. And they're doing a lot of campaigning to try and ensure that nothing like this ever happens again. So they're definitely worth supporting as well.
14th of June, people write that down in your diaries. If you've got your diary on your phone, put that down in your phone. Information about that particular, where would people find it? I don't know if it's already out there.
It will be, there is either on Instagram or Facebook, so if you follow Grenfell United on there or the Grenfell Silent Walk, you will find that information, and on Twitter as well.
Okay. Right, so we're coming shortly to the ad break. Remthu's still going to hopefully still be here in the second half of the show, where we will be focusing more about the community coming together, how the community came together in the aftermath of this tragedy. You are tuned in to the Ramadan special on EAVA 102.5 FM. You can also watch the show on Facebook Live, tune in over the Twitter, YouTube. You can also text in on the second part of the show, just to repeat the number 07450925084. Stay tuned to your Ramadan special on EAVA FM. My name's Shermeen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. later for inquest. Welcome back to the show, Remy.
Hi.
So just to say that this section of the show, inshallah, I wanted to focus more about the community coming together in the aftermath of the chaos of the Grenfell Tower tragedy. And we talked earlier about and quoted from the report, the Family Day consultation report, around the experiences of some of the families in the aftermath, the not knowing what was going on, not knowing whether relatives were alive, not knowing where to find them, not knowing. But that's one aspect. Of course, the other aspect is suddenly you are homeless. You have nothing. And this was something where the community around really came in support.
They did, and it wasn't just the immediate community. It was people from around the country went to the scene to help. And I think that the images that we all saw that morning on the 14th of June were just so shocking that people really felt that they needed to do something, that they needed to go and help our brothers and sisters who were suffering in this way. And what we saw was an influx of people bringing clothes, shoes, food. A number of charities arrived on the scene to hand out water to try and help those that were just didn't know where to go. Their homes were lost. They had nowhere to go.
And they had nothing with them. I mean, this is the other thing as well.
Absolutely. And it's a month of Ramadan, remember?
Yes.
And there were a lot of Muslims in that block.
And they were suddenly just without. And it was mosques, it was churches, it was gurdwaras who opened the doors, who gave them somewhere to sleep, gave them water, gave them food. I was reading again from the report, and I really highly do recommend you read the report. It really makes you stop and think. This is the Family Day consultation report, which Inquest consulted with the families who were involved with the Grenfell Tower tragedy, taking their thoughts and putting them in a way that you and I can easily read. It's not, I have to say, it's not one of those reports that you can't understand. I can tell you that for a fact. It's not filled with all the jargon. It's really, and that's what I liked about the report, Ramadan, I have to admit. It's accessible, really is accessible. And what people had said in the aftermath, they said, we received no guidance, no support at all. It was a few days before someone got in touch with the direct next of kin or our family. In our family, we were very much left to our own devices. In those early hours, we, family and communities, began to network, building our own support network initially.
That's true, and that's actually how community groups like Grenfell United became formed, because nobody seemed to know exactly who lived in the tower block. And those that had managed to thankfully escape the tower then were able to start making a list of all their neighbours and all the people that they knew that lived in the tower. And that's how Grenfell United became formed, because they realised that they really did need to come together as a community to try and really focus on what has happened, but also to try and get some justice and get to the truth of what had happened. And there are other groups that formed as well. There's Justice for Grenfell, there was Relative Justice Humanity for Grenfell, and also the Grenfell Trust. And
just reflecting on that, how many floors were there again in Grenfell?
It's a 23-storey
23-storey class. It's a lot of people, all the way in, to know everybody. I can appreciate to know who exactly was there. And especially on that fateful night, because other people might be visiting as well.
There were, unfortunately, yes. I mean, it was Ramadan. People had come round for iftar and had stayed. And so, yeah, there were many people in that block.
To quote again from the report, another person had said, we got help from Islamic Relief and Red Cross. They offered us shelter and support. They asked if anybody needed help. It was really tough for us as it was Ramadan and it was really hot. Another added, in the days that followed, it was community groups, for example, Grenfell United, among others, that began to mobilize support, communicating essential advice and information, especially via social media, family WhatsApp groups, proving invaluable in creating a bank of knowledge and help for families in need. Aid organisations and NGOs, the Red Cross, Muslim Aid, Inquest, were also commended for their action following the fire, both in terms of offering immediate care and then specialist advice. And that really, and not just that, there were actually so many individuals who went down, and I know there were people who went down from Leicester, and if you are tuned in, do message in. We can't get you on the phone line, unfortunately, because I've got Remeth on the phone line. There's only one phone line here. You can text in, and I'd love to hear your thoughts from that day and in the aftermath. And the text line is 07450 925 084. That's 07450 925 084. And if you are just tuning in, this is the Ramadan special on EAVA 102.5 FM. And I've just had a message through from my producer that this radio station, did a live coverage of the incident and some live interviews. Yeah, you did. Really interesting to have a link for that, if you've got it, some way of posting that up. It's quite interesting. I didn't see, you learn things every day, subhanAllah. And you learn actually the level of support. We were called then LRB Digital, okay? We'll look that up, Mr. Producer, and put that on the Facebook so people can look that up afterwards, inshallah. So coming back to this, the way in which the community came together. The other thing as well, Ramith, was I was reading, because before this, I remember 2 years ago watching the footage and reading some things around what had happened on that day, but obviously before this show I went back to look at what had happened, and I was reminding, especially being the month of Ramadan, that as we mentioned before, there are people staying over for the month of Ramadan, people who are unaccounted for. But also the courage of some of the young lads, Muslim lads, who went around knocking on the doors. As they were waiting for Sari, they found about the fire, they went around knocking on the doors of fellow residents to try and get them out. And alhamdulillah, they were awake at that time, and they were able to, some people have said, in some of the news reports I read, because they did that, they saved lives.
They did, and they'd come back from the mosque, Al-Manar Mosque, which is very nearby to the tower, and was instrumental in the aftermath and still is today. And they were just returning from Tarawih prayers and saw the building alight and did raise the alarm, because what you have to remember, and I don't know if your listeners will know this is a 23-floor tower block, but there was no whole building alarm system. There was no way of notifying everybody in the building at the same time that something was wrong and they should really exit the building.
SubhanAllah. No, I think a lot of listeners wouldn't be aware. Even myself, I wouldn't have been aware. I would assume that would be in place, like you have in a school, or you'd have even if you have in hotels. You have, if there's a fire, even you have a regular. I'm just lost for that word. What's the word? Where they test the alarm.
A regular fire drill, yeah.
Yes, fire drill, that's it. So nothing like that was in place.
No, and the reason for that was that the tower block, it was built in 1974, and it was very solidly built. It's a concrete building. And the whole point of having large-scale tower blocks of that scale is compartmentalisation, which means that if a fire breaks out in a flat, it doesn't spread to other flats, or it's not meant to. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, in this situation, because the fire took hold in the cladding, which is on the outside of the building, it unfortunately spread and covered the entire building. And
so quickly at that. And I was talking about the cladding, and we moved on to that. The BBC did an investigation about this, and where it found the Grenfell Tower cladding failed to meet standards, and that was an investigation they conducted on the 5th of April 2018. So people pointing the finger at this cladding, obviously that's subject to the public inquiry, and hopefully inshallah we'll find out what role that cladding had to play in the fire spreading so quickly.
Yes, the public inquiry has actually hired a number of different experts to look into the actual structure of the building and the cladding, and it was after the refurbishment of the tower, and that was concluded in 2016, that cladding was actually placed on the building. But as you say, this is the subject of a public inquiry and also a criminal investigation. We're waiting for the public inquiry to release their report into phase one. It was actually due to be released in spring, but on Friday, just gone, the inquiry team announced that unfortunately it won't be ready to be released until October of this year.
Yes, well, so that's another good 6 months delay?
There's quite a delay, yes. And that's really, it's difficult, as you can imagine, for bereaved and survivors to just have to keep waiting for this, particularly as they're just so anxious that something like this just doesn't happen again.
And other people who perhaps are living in tower blocks as well, wondering the same question. But I did want to just put something out there with regards to that. When I was reading through some of the information, that there was, on the aftermath of the Grenfell Tower tragedy, the Home Office report published in 2017, which looked into the fires in purpose-built flats. It looked at the data around the fires, and previously there were very few fatalities. In 2016, 2017, there were only 3 fatalities. So, I mean, some people might well say that Grenfell was a tragic exception. We do need to get to the bottom, however, of why it was that exception. And as we mentioned before, there's a public inquiry which is continuing around this to get to the bottom of why it happened, so it doesn't happen again. And Rama, just to ask you, what do you feel in terms of what your thoughts about getting justice, and why is it important to get justice for Grenfell?
I think it's important, it's clearly important for those that lost their loved ones and those that lost their homes, but I think it's something that's important for all of us in this country and further afield, because this is something as basic as being safe in your own home. Mm-hmm. This is what this comes down to. And how it's even possible that all these people that lived in that building were just not safe that day. Some just didn't even make it out. And that, to me, that beggars belief. The fact that, and if it was the cladding, which it looks likely, having seen the evidence so far in the public inquiry, and as you mentioned, the BBC report and other investigative reports, well then, there really have to be questions asked about why was cladding of that kind, where a fire can spread so quickly, put on the outside of a residential building. That's just a basic question. And I think we need to get to the truth of actually what happened, and there needs to be justice. And justice, it can take many different forms. And having spoken to some of the bereaved and survivors, they've said to me, well, justice is to make sure that this doesn't happen to anybody again. Others want to see criminal prosecutions come out of this, and they want to see people being held responsible for what happened.
I can understand that. I think anybody can understand that, really. Right. It has been very insightful speaking to you about this, Ramadan, and the importance of remembering what happened on that day has become apparent, hopefully, to those who will be listening. And just if you have tuned in, this is the Ramadan special on EAVA 102.5 FM. The producer has put up some links on the Facebook Live, so if you are watching on Facebook Live, you do want to go on there later, there is a link to the Grenfell United page, to the report they've been reading through on air today, and also to the footage which was taken by the Leicester team 2 years ago on site. So they've also put that on there, managed to find that footage, and that's up on there as well. We do have Naeem Briscoe, who will be able to join the show shortly afterwards, so do stay tuned for that. Ramith, your final thoughts?
I'd like to really give the final word to bereaved and survivors who are still grieving and traumatised, but they are the ones that are campaigning to try and ensure that there is change and to try and ensure that something like this doesn't happen again. And they're fighting for the safety of all of us.
Absolutely.
So that we don't have to go through the unspeakable pain that they face every day. And I'm always inspired by them, by their dignity and defiance and commitment to preventing future tragedies.
Thank you so much, Ramad, for joining us today. And really appreciate you taking your time. We have been talking today about the Grenfell fire tragedy. Inshallah, we're going to be joined by Anaim Briscoe, who was there on the day to share his thoughts. He's a brother from Leicester. Are you going to get... I'm just going to... Yeah? Okay, as soon as you get Ramad off the line, you're going to put a name on. Okay, thanks, Ramad, again, once again, for your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Just to say that while we get Naeem Briscoe on the line, this is the amazing thing about live radio, that you can randomly things happen and change, and we like to sort of include that here on the Ramadan special EAVA 102.5 FM. I want to leave you with a quote of verse from the Quran to ponder upon, because when I was looking this up, I was reminded about a particular verse from the Quran. In Surah An-Nisa, verse 135, where it says, "O you who have believed, be persistently standing firm in justice, witnesses for Allah, and even if it be against yourselves or parents and relatives, whether one is rich or poor, Allah is more worthy of both. So follow not a person's inclination, lest you not be just. And if you distort your testimony or refuse to give it, then indeed Allah is ever with what you do acquainted." So justice is very much part of our faith. And I ask everybody today who's been listening and tuned in to make dua for those who lost their life on that tragic night in the Grenfell Tower fire, and make dua that the victims of that tragic night do get the justice they deserve, and that we don't have to witness a tragedy like that again in our lifetime. I think we have Naeem joining us on the line. Yeah? So, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Hope you're doing well.
Yes, alhamdulillah. I'm glad Mr. Producer has managed to get you on as well. I was trying to get hold of you. I heard there was a brother called Naeem Briscoe who went down to the tragedy, but I didn't manage to get you on. So alhamdulillah, Mr. Producer has managed to do that. Brother, tell me more about what happened and how you got involved with the Grenfell Tower fire and the tragedy around that.
Okay, so I'll share my story with you, how it all began. So I remember waking up quite early that morning, because I always wake up very early. It's just one of them habits. I'll go through my phone, I'll check the various social media, business, etc. And I remember scrolling a little bit and seeing the news of a fire on a tower. Now, my first sort of initial thinking was that that's not in the UK, that's somewhere abroad. Things like that don't happen on our home turf, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So I kind of just spun through it, ignored it, went down, had my breakfast, went into the office, and as I'm driving to the office now, I'm listening to the great local radio, and I'm starting to hear about the building. So now I'm putting the picture of what I've seen on social media, and I'm kind of like starting to get a little bit emotional, thinking, what the heck's going on? So I get into my office, and I start doing some research in the office of what's going on, i.e. Sky News, etc., etc. At that point, I've just come back from Greece, because I do a lot of charity work. So I was with refugees in Greece, and I just got back. I landed 2 days before, and I said, you know what, this is a really serious incident, and I can't just sit down and be normal. I need to do something about it. So I got a video done on social media where I closed all my branches in Leicester, and I asked all my team to meet in one location, and let's start loading our van up. Now, little did I know that video I did kind of went viral. It went all over the place. And, all the mainstream newspapers and the news and BBC Extra got hold of it. It was very good, because that kind of elevated the campaign we had. Alhamdulillah, I've got to say one thing, my dear sister, that Leicester, I've done a lot of charity work, but I've seen people of all backgrounds women, men, children, all coming out to this van. It's like zombies coming one by one and loading this van up. And within
mashallah.
15 minutes, the whole van was chock-a-block. We had
Mashallah.
no more space for aid. So alhamdulillah, that happened. And obviously, at that moment, first, I feel very proud of my city. And I feel proud of the local priests coming down, the local Maulana coming down, different people of different backgrounds working together. I was very proud of that. At the same time, I was slightly hurt as well because I realized that I'm going to go. I've traveled to places and I've seen a lot of hardship. But this one's going to be a very difficult one for me because it's right next door to me. It's in my home country.
Absolutely.
When you go abroad and you deal with situations, it's slightly different because you can catch a flight, come back home, and you can switch off it.
Yeah.
But when it's local, you start thinking about your own children. You start thinking about what would happen if I was in there.
Absolutely.
What other people are going through.
And I think this is one of those questions which came to mind. People kept asking, why would you want to talk about the Grenfell Tower tragedy? What's it got to do with Leicester? And I think you're answering it.
Yeah, so then, my dear sister, you're 100% right, and I agree with you. It's a humanitarian crisis, and we all need to be involved. We all have to be involved, especially if it's in your homeland. We do a lot of charity abroad, and don't get me wrong, it's amazing. We should help a lot of people. But there's a saying, and I've learned this in the past few years, charity must start at home. We have bigger problems, major issues here. Anyway, so I was driving down, and as I'm driving down to the Grenfell Towers, I didn't know where I'm going to go. I just put something in my sat-nav, and from the grace of God and the du'as of all of the people, we landed exactly in a depot that was just outside the tower. Now, my first experience, my sister, was, I'm not going to lie to you, I'm going to be very honest, there's only a few times I've cried when I've done charity work. One was when I was in Greece in Lesbos, when boats were coming through, and I heard the cries and screams of young children. It really hurt me a lot. And one of them was when I actually looked at this situation, looked at this building, looked at everyone around me. I was just in a shock. I was totally in shock, and I could not control my emotions. I had to put my hand on my eyes, and I did shed a few tears. I tried to compose myself, but seeing the environment around me, it really, really hurt me a lot. I was severely, when I got back, I struggled to sleep at night because I thought, just say somebody post something in my letterbox and there's a fire in my house. I even put a ladder in the back of my house just as a precaution because it affected me that much. So we went there, we got there, we executed the aid. One of the beautiful things is we've made this chain of humanity, I call it. So from the van, there's about 50 people, and there was people of all ethnicities and ages, and we made this chain of humanity, and everyone one by one was passing this aid into the depot. So there was good feelings with getting that, but there's also very, very tough feelings about it as well, my dear sister.
Jazakallah Naeem. Unfortunately, brother, we're coming to the end of my show. It's a real shame that we weren't able to get you on earlier. Perhaps it's something we can revisit, perhaps on the 19th of Ramadan, which is actually when Grenfell Tower tragedy happened. But if you have been tuned in today, you have been tuned into the Ramadan special on EAVA FM. My name's Shermeen. The show was the Morning Matters show and been reflecting upon the Grenfell Tower tragedy. And I want everybody who's listened to Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.